Hello, and thank you for joining us for our latest webinar, Global Oncology Opportunities and Trends 2025, Key Markets, Indications, and Products. My name is Informa Murray. I'm the Assistant Director of Events Marketing at Informa Pharma Intelligence, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's webcast. Before we jump in, let's go over some housekeeping items. First, if at any time you are having technical difficulties, click on the Test Your Connection button, and this will take you to a connection checker and FAQs page. If you continue to have technical issues, there is a Chat Now function for access to the support team who can assist. There will be a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so if you have any questions, we want to hear from you. To ask something of our presenters, click on the Ask Question button located in the top right side of your screen. Type your question in the question window and then hit Submit. We'll be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A session, and if there's extras, we'll try to answer you after the webcast via email. Because we know you'll want to listen to this webinar again, today's session is being recorded and will be available to view on demand following the end of the live event. And with that, let's get started. I would like now to introduce our moderator for this event, Poorna Chandra Tejasvi, Pharma Intelligence Senior Director of Emerging Markets in India. Poorna has over 20 years of experience covering business development, pharma consulting, and international business development in the pharmaceutical, generics, and biotech industry, helping professionals to make the best decisions from early-stage portfolio decisions, commercial planning, to clinical research and development. Poorna, the floor is yours.
Welcome everyone to Informa Pharma Intelligence webinar, Global Oncology Opportunities and Trends, covering key markets, indications, and products. So let's begin today's webinar. So here is a brief introduction on Informa Pharma Intelligence, who we are and what we do, in case some of you are new to us. So Informa Pharma Intelligence is the leading provider of drug, device, company, clinical trial, and market intelligence in the pharmaceutical and medtech markets. We are a global news and insights and data analytics business headquartered in London with our group offices in Bangalore, Mumbai, and Delhi in India. Most of the top 50 pharma and biotech organizations are our clients and partner with us to our portfolio of industry-leading products like Sightlines, TrialTro, SiteTro, Pharma Projects, Data Monitor Healthcare, Biomed Tracker, Generic Bulletin, Scripts, Pharma 360, which is our new integrated offering, and also for pharma consulting services. We help pharma, biotech, and life science clients make informed decisions across the clinical, regulatory, commercial space, and then execute with precision. Our subject matter experts carry deep expertise with evidence-based data combined with superior geographic coverage of key developed and emerging markets. We have in-depth industry expertise with over 400 industry analysts, consultants, and 60 expert journalists on the ground in key world regions, gathering pharmaceutical data, analytics, and news. We help in creating a complete picture of the market trends and competitor movements with the ability to benchmark and monitor developments as they happen. Our data, technology, and domain expertise are the clear differentiators enabling us to deliver unparalleled results to our clients. We enable companies to maximize opportunities, avoid risk, and plan for what comes next. So I would like to introduce you to our speakers for today's session. Our first speaker today, Anju Gangode, is Executive Director, APAC team for our Insight Solutions, Script and Pink Sheet. She has over 2 decades of experience in journalism, including stints at India's leading financial daily. Based in Mumbai, Anju covers a range of topics across the pharma and biosimilar landscape, drug pricing, policy and regulatory affairs, mergers and acquisitions, and patents, are areas of special interest to her. Our second speaker today is Vincent Spur, our commercial product specialist. Having worked across all of Informa Pharma Intelligence products as a business development manager and account manager, Vince's role is to support clients across the EMEA, India, and MENA regions to help understand individual product methodologies and user journeys to maximize the value that Informa solutions can provide. Here is the agenda of the webinar, so you can see the topics and the areas we'll be covering during this presentation. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to our first presenter, Anju, to take you through our first item, Oncology Recent Defining Trends. Over to you, Anju.
Yeah, thanks, Purna, and welcome again to all executives from the industry joining us today. Thank you for your time. So we're going to highlight some of the key developments and the huge opportunities in the oncology space, which of course many of you are already well aware and perhaps in the thick of things too. But as Purna mentioned, we'd like to share the wealth of resources, the rich data that we have based on our in-house and on-ground strength, both from the insights team and the intelligence side that Informa could provide you as you take some of the key decisions and navigate this competitive and complex terrain. So with that, let me dive right into the presentation. Let me begin with the broader oncology landscape and some of the key trends that we are seeing. So 2020 was perhaps all about COVID-19. But it's important to note that despite all of the COVID-related activity, cancer remained the largest area of interest for all the top 10 companies, except for Merck, which majors in anti-infectives as it did last year. But importantly, what we saw was that anti-infective interest of some of the frontline companies like AZ and BMS widened. For instance, BMS had 18 drugs in development versus 7 in this category. Now, despite the pandemic and all the challenges, the pharma oncology franchise grew by over 6,900 drugs in 2021, and that's a good 7% up, ahead of the overall pipeline growth rate. Now, while the rise was obviously dented a bit by COVIDization of resources, it was nevertheless an impressive gain. The overall R&D pipeline, for instance, was at 18,582 drugs, and that's just about 5% up. So cancer has made its mark yet again. Importantly, the proportion of the pipeline which is in development for cancer has continued to move northward, and almost 38% of all drugs have an onco focus. Breast cancer remains industry's top target, with almost 886 candidates being developed. The next nearest rival target is NSCLC with 746 candidates, and then that is followed by colorectal and pancreatic cancers at 653 and 570 candidates respectively. Just in case you're interested, in view of the controversial FDA approval for the Biogen Alzheimer's drug Aduhelm that has been the talking point in industry over the recent past, the number of approvals that we've seen, the number of drugs in development that we've seen for Alzheimer's stood at a good 436 number of candidates. Well, this is down a bit from the 2020 number, but nevertheless a good number. I'd also just like to say that 6 out of the top 10 companies have seen some activity in all the therapy areas that we are focused on, including the small category of antiparasitics. So quite a bit of action going on here. Moving to the next slide, it actually reinforces what we stated. cancer remains a huge area of interest. Now, if I can look at the image and data on the left-hand side of your screen, here we see the rise of cancer R&D, but you'll also notice that anti-infectives R&D is up, and it's been up 22% due to the development of COVID therapies and vaccines, and this is the biggest percentage increase by any group. Also, we have a segment here, the biotech segment, which is strictly speaking not a therapy area, but it's included here because of the strong activity and the growth that we've seen, almost 11%, and more importantly, almost 49% of anti-cancers also fit into this biotech segment. So clearly there is a lot of movement in the biotech space, and a lot of it is in the cancer domain. Now, if I can look at the image and data on the right-hand side, this depicts the rise of cancer as a proportion of the overall pipeline. Now, we can see that there is a slight slowdown in the expansion rate, but as my colleague in Pharma Projects and Data Integration described it, cancer still has a Vulcan death grip-like hold on pharma R&D. Of course, he's referring to the fictitious technique invented by Spock in Star Trek. Moving to the next slide. Here we are looking at generally how robust the trial scenario has been despite the pandemic. And in 2020, in fact, Informa Trial Trove reported that there were more trial starts in oncology than ever, with close to 5,000 trials underway. So clearly, R&D into other diseases was not really completely dented as everybody looked at COVID. But this pales in comparison with what we saw in the anti-infective trial start segment, which was up by a whopping 220%. So what we're trying to say here is that industry essentially did a lot more rather than only diverting research to COVID. And we are all aware of the kind of momentum vaccine R&D has had and has been turbocharged. And if you actually look at the actual number of studies, there are over 15,000 ongoing trials in oncology currently, with 6,500 in phase 2 alone. CNS comes in at second with roughly 5,400. And infectious disease with all the COVID activity is in third place with upwards of 4,500. I'd also like to briefly touch upon the regional variations in R&D by disease. Now, cancer remains the dominant therapy area in Asia, China, the EU, Japan, US and South America. Breast cancer remains industry's leading target. It's in prime position in some of the markets. NSCLC is the top 3 in China, Asia, Canada and the EU. In the US, it is breast cancer, NSCLC and infections and COVID R&D. And I'd also like to mention that rheumatoid arthritis is in the top 3 in Europe and South America. So the next slide essentially recaps the dominance of oncology. So here we are seeing that there are 6,500 trials in phase 2 alone in oncology, and also a significant number of phase 4 studies in CNS, anti-infectives, the metabolic and endocrinology segment. So all in all, a rather encouraging trial scenario despite all the COVID-related challenges. With that, let me hand over to my colleague, Vincent, to give you a peek into the key collaborations and deals in the space. Over to you, Vincent.
Thank you very much, Anji. So The oncology deals in 2020 totaled 386, which made oncology the most active therapy area for deals, with the second being infectious diseases, being the main driver for that being the response for COVID-19 pandemic. The combined total value of the oncology alliances in 2020 was 91.6 billion. Some of the most notable alliance deals in 2020 were Merck KJA and Artios Pharma's alliance for a novel DNA response target with a potential deal value of 6.91 billion. Daiichi Sankyo and AstraZeneca's deal for a TROP2 directed ADC product that is currently in phase 1. This collaboration could potentially reach a total value of $6 billion. And Myovant Sciences and Pfizer's partnerships for Religulix that is approved in prostate cancer. This deal has a potential deal value of 4.2 billion. Oncology also had the highest volume of M&A deals in 2020 with 6 announced mergers and acquisitions. Gilead's acquisition of Immunomedics was the largest acquisition with a potential deal value of 21 billion. Another one of Gilead's deals was their acquisition of a clinical stage immuno-oncology company called 47 Inc. for 4.9 billion. Now, the Stanford University spin-out is targeting engaging macrophages to target tumors using the CD47 pathway. Back over to you, Angie.
Yeah, thanks, Vincent. So with that as the overall backdrop of the broader oncology landscape, let's now touch upon some of the key generic opportunities. So we've highlighted 4 such opportunities. This is Lilly's Alimta, the 2 BMS products, Revlimid and Pomalyst, and the AbbVie J&J product, Imbruvica. We are happy to share more info on all the 4, but in the interest of time, I'm going to essentially focus for now on Alimta and touch upon the others briefly down the line. So let's begin with Alimta. As you all know, it's seen as a safe and effective option for almost all non-squamous patients. It's used in first line, second line, and maintenance treatment settings. And for example, in 2019, the FDA approved a new indication for Alimta in combination with Merck's Keytruda and platinum chemotherapy for first line treatment of patients with metastatic non-squamous NSCLC with no EGFR or ALK genomic tumor. So clearly a number of combinations and settings where this product is used. So I'd like to briefly touch upon the patent landscape, and as you all know, it's a hotly contested area and a rather dynamic one. Historically, Alimta has seen robust sales in all the key markets, the US, Japan, and the key EU markets as well. It's currently protected by a vitamin regimen patent this year and gets pediatric exclusivity till May next year. So what we've seen is that the vitamin regimen patents are expected to provide protection through this month in Japan and major European nations and through May 2022 in the US. We've already seen that Alimta generics have been approved in Japan from Savai Pharmaceutical, Nippon Kayaku, and these would be launched post-expiry. In fact, Savai has listed the Alimta generic as part of the 8 products to be launched sequentially from mid-June onwards. And just an indication of how dynamic this space is, on June 25th, Sandoz announced the launch of its ready-to-dilute Pemetrexed in all countries across Europe, including Germany and the Netherlands. But in the US, what we've seen is that most of the challenges have gone Lilly's way, and I think just one remains in active litigation. So if I dive a bit deeper into this litigation scenario, Lilly has been rather successful in pushing back all the key generic players, including Apotex, BRL, Hospira, and the others. In December 2020, the US Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit affirmed the district court infringement ruling versus Apotex and this was under the doctrine of equivalence. This has been cited for several of the other rulings as well. Last year, we also saw the Supreme Court of Germany uphold the Alimta patent, and that forced out several at-risk launches. We've seen wins for Lilly in France and the Netherlands as well, and I think Fresenius has appealed the Dutch decision. But it's the US market that everybody is keeping a sharp eye on. Actavis got an FDA approval for its 505(b)(2) alternative salt formulation, but it has to receive either a final judgment from the US court or then wait till May 22 to actually debut with its product. In 2019, we saw that Lilly and Eagle entered into a settlement for the launch of Pempexi starting Feb 22. This is again an approximate 3-week supply, and then subsequently uncapped entry starting April 22. Just a quick update on the Japanese scenario, where the Japanese patent office has issued notices closing Hospira's invalidation, and the matter now stands closed. Moving to the next slide. So here, we'd just like to outline the broad pricing expectations for Alimta generics. So we expect generic Alimta to launch at roughly 23% and 40% of the Alimta brand annual patient cost in the US and EU respectively. In Japan, we expect Alimta to be initially priced at 50% discount to the Alimta brand annual patient cost. For specifics and some of the nitty-gritties on this, please do feel free to reach out either to Purna or Raj to take those queries forward. So it is a rather competitive scenario. Many people in the fray, many companies, and all top-ranked companies. So very interesting space to keep an eye on. With that, I'd like to hand back to Vincent for some details on Alimta's sales, independent events, and patient numbers. Over to you, Vincent.
Thank you, Angie. The global sales for Alimta, based on Data Monitor Healthcare's sales-based forecast, is $1.3 billion in the US, with the second largest market being in Japan, where Alimta is forecasted to reach $264.16 million US dollars. Now, Alimta is due to face increased competition in the second line in the US, 5EU, and Japan. The forecasted impact of increased competition is a 13% decrease in sales within the 5EU. In Japan, the forecasted impact is a 6% decline, and in the US, the impact is expected to be an 8% decline in sales. However, within the US, approval for Alimta to be used in combination with Keytruda will positively increase sales for the drug by 16%. Now, based on Data Monitor Healthcare's patient-based forecast, the estimated total number of patients for Alimta in the US in 2020 was 37,542 within the non-small cell lung cancer indication. The patients are split between 12,296 in the first line setting and 9,757 in the second line. In the adjuvant setting, Alimta's US forecasted patients was 8,661. Within the 5EU countries, Alimta's total patient numbers were 24,538, with 34% of those patients being in the first line setting. In Japan, the total number of patients was 17,968, with 37% of those patients being in the first line. Now, other drugs that have a presence within the adjuvant non-small cell lung cancer setting is Imfinzi, with Tagrisso also forecasted for growth in the segment. In the first line setting of non-small cell lung cancer, Keytruda's patient share is 46.8%, with Alimta owning a 12% share of patients within the US. Moving to slide 20, you can see based on Biomed Tracker's unique likelihood of approval metrics, there are 5 phase 3 assets in non-small cell lung cancer that are above the average likelihood of approval. Ensartinib by Discovery demonstrated superior progression-free survival versus Alclori. However, the second generation ALK inhibitor will face competition in the first line setting. MRTX 849 achieved an overall response rate of 45% and a disease control rate of 96% in its Crystal-1 phase 1b clinical trial for pre-treated non-small cell lung cancer patients. Mirati aims to compete with sotorasib in the KRAS inhibitor space. SAR 408701 showed promising results in pre-treated non-small cell lung cancer patients, with Sanofi testing the drug in the second line or later. Sanofi initiated the phase 3 Carmen LOC3 study versus docetaxel in 2019. And with that, I'll hand back to Angie to look at the other opportunities on the horizon.
Yeah, thanks, Vincent. So let's briefly touch upon the other 3 generic opportunities on the horizon. Up first, we have Revlimid. This, as you all know, is a $12.1 billion drug, first marketed by Celgene to treat multiple myeloma way back in 2006, and then it changed hands with Celgene being acquired by BMS in that massive $74 billion acquisition in 2019. So what we've seen is that there are currently almost, I think, a dozen US ANDA filers. Revlimid loses patent protection in Q1 22 in the US and Q2 22 in the major EU markets. In Feb 2019, Alvogen and Lotus launched the first Revlimid generics in some of the CEE markets, including Romania and Bulgaria. Now, what we've seen is that in the US, most of the settlements that have come through are essentially volume-limited settlement agreements beginning sometime after March 2022. First off the block is likely to be Natco with a volume-limited entry beginning in 22 March. Anticipated mid-single-digit percentage of capsules sold in the first 12 months, and then it would go up gradually every year. Now, Natco also has the license to sell generic Revlimid in the US without volume-limited limitations, commencing in late Jan 2026. Over the recent past, we've seen Zydus has also settled with Celgene this year, and more recently, Sun has settled with Celgene. Again, these are all initially limited quantity sales and then unlimited quantity beginning Jan 2026. If I can just touch on Pomalyst, also known as Imnovid in the EU. This has regulatory exclusivity until 2023 in the EU and 25 in Japan. Again, a whole lot of ANDA filings. We know that Teva, Apotex, Hetero, Aurobindo, Mylan, DRL, all in the fray. In November 2020, we saw Celgene and Breckenridge enter into a settlement agreement. We are also aware of patent infringement action happening in Canada with a trial for Natco expected to believe in November this year. The final one is Imbruvica. And as you all know, this is a $6.6 billion product split along geographic lines between AbbVie and J&J. AbbVie reports in the US and J&J internationally, and each of them pays the other a portion of profits. This again has a several number of generic players in the fray, and Natco Alvogen have claimed exclusivity for 4 strengths of the tablet version, with Zydus claiming exclusivity for the 70 mg capsule and shared exclusivity for the 140 mg. Now, I just want to also touch briefly upon the bit on follow-on BTK inhibitors. Now, unusually, pharma's response to developing follow-on BTK inhibitors has been somewhat less enthusiastic or muted. And though we've seen Calquence, the AstraZeneca product, secure FDA approval way back in 2017, and the Chinese company BeiGene coming in with Brukinsa and Ono Pharmaceutical with Velex Group, what we're seeing is that next generation BTK inhibitors are increasingly seeking to apply the mechanism of inflammatory and immunological diseases. Following on from Imbruvica's success on graft versus host disease, rather than actually competing with established oncology indications. So we are seeing competition heat up in rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. And we are also seeing that Roche, Merck, and some of the big names have ongoing programs in multiple sclerosis. So clearly there is a lot of action unfolding in this space, and the generic opportunities appear rather rich and interesting. So finally, if I can just sum up today's discussion, oncology remains the key area of R&D thrust despite the pandemic. Almost 38% of all drugs in the pipeline are focused in this area. 2020 saw a huge number of trial starts in oncology, more than ever. Oncology remains the most active therapy area for alliances and collaborations. Breast cancer remains the top target, and we are seeing a huge number of generic opportunities unfolding in the oncology space. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and now hand back to Poorna for closing remarks and opening the session to questions. Over to you, Poorna.
Thanks, Anju. Great insights, Anju and Vince, for your presentation. And now we are going to open up with the question and answer session. So please add any questions you have in the chat box, and we'll try our best to go through these. Any questions we don't get time to answer today, we will come back with an email response as soon as we can. So please start typing your questions soon, and we will try to answer all of them. So the first question what we have is, what are the other top indications in oncology along with breast cancer? Can you share some insights? So Anju, would you want to take this question?
Yeah, sure, Poorna. I'll take that one. So I think, as we said, cancer is a top indication overall for the portfolio, and in our study, it holds 14 of the top 20 slots in our analysis. And as we mentioned, breast cancer holds the top position with 886 drugs under development, but this is actually a 4% decline over the previous year. And it's followed by NSCLC and colorectal cancer. We also have pancreatic cancer in 4th position and ovarian cancer coming in 6th position. Brain cancer is in 8th position. And I just want to flag up gastrointestinal cancer, which is seen high prevalence in the Asian region, especially in Japan, China, and Korea, is in 16th position with almost 358 drugs. And interestingly, as you know, several of the top frontline companies, including Amgen, all of them are looking at this area, that is gastric cancer, in a big way. I hope that answers some of it.
Thanks, Anju. So the next question we have is, can you identify licensing opportunities for oncology in different markets? Vince, would you want to take this question?
Yes, definitely. So by utilizing all the different platforms that we have at Informa, our analyst teams are utilizing multiple different sources in order to help identify when companies have made an announcement that they would like to partner or find a regional licensing player. We're also looking at multiple different sources to help identify which drugs are currently partnered and unpartnered. So by utilizing Informa Pharma Intelligence solutions, you are in a position to help identify which opportunities are going to be great for your organization based around whether they are announced to be open for licensing or whether they are currently unpartnered and looking to be marketed in a particular geography.
Thanks, Vince. That helps a lot. So there's one more question. What are the factors considered to determine percentage of likelihood of approval? So Vince, again, you might want to take this question.
Yes, certainly. So the likelihood of approval analysis comes from a paper written by our managing director, Mike Hay. So essentially, each different disease area has its own baseline for a drug in phase 1, for a drug in phase 2, and a drug in phase 3. So for oncology, 5% is a baseline for a phase 1 asset, 11% is for a phase 2, and 44% is for a phase 3. Our analyst teams, who are all therapy area experts, they will then look at key data points. So things like top-line trial data results, published results, final results, any regulatory impacts, complete response letters, all individual factors that might positively or negatively impact a drug's likelihood of being approved. Our analyst teams will then subjectively provide analysis behind it. Therefore, when you are utilizing the analysis behind the likelihood of approval, you can track individually behind each different key event a drug has had. So a drug in phase 3 that announced positive trial data, the analyst team will then provide a justification for what individual patient segment, what's the impact for the drug in a patient segment. Is it hyper competitive? Is it under competitive? Is there a complete response that's significantly better than the current standard of care? But utilizing the analyst's subjective opinion and commentary, that's what will help influence each individual key event and how positively or negatively that is going to impact the drug's likelihood of approval.
Thanks, Vince. So we have one more question. The question is, what insights can you provide on potential biosimilar opportunities over the next few years? So Vince and Anju, if any one of you want to take it, or both of you want to add some insights, I'm fine with that.
I can just give you a couple of indications on this one. So I think we've identified a biosimilar for Jetta, that is the Roche product for breast cancer, as a significant opportunity. I think we know that Perjeta is being pursued by Viatris and also by the Chinese company Shanghai Henlius. So exclusivity on this product runs till I think June 24 in the US and 23 in Europe. So it's an interesting opportunity and a big market. Another big one I think should be Kadcyla. Again, a Roche product with patent expiry coming in the US a little down the line, 2026 July. And the significant part is that we've seen a couple of Indian companies already readying their products, and in fact Zydus has launched a cut price version in India. So I think this should be an interesting opportunity, and given the kind of readiness we are seeing on local markets as well. Vince, over to you if you'd like to add something.
Yes, certainly. From an Informa solution perspective, we are actively tracking the biosimilar landscape, and we have a specific dashboard that was created in order to help monitor where are biosimilar studies taking place, where are biosimilars marketed, and everything around biosimilars, including some of the great content that our journalist teams have written about. So in terms of being able to monitor and track the biosimilar landscape, that is something that we also do as an individual standalone offering.
Thanks, Vince. So the question I have now is, what is the source of Alimta global sales and forecast number? And is there a forecast methodology you have? Vince, you want to take this question?
Yes, definitely. So the initial forecast that you saw came from Data Monitor Healthcare, where the analyst teams are looking at historical sales from company reported sales data, and then we're looking at upcoming events that are essentially going to impact that. So where we saw competition, you see genericization, and you see any key events that are going to impact the drug's performance, the analyst teams will then model how that will look in terms of a top-down sales forecast. The other forecast that you'll see is a patient-based forecast. Essentially what our team does is we start with the epidemiologists, who will look at multiple different literature sources. They'll look at all the key epidemiological studies. We'll then use our disease analysis team, who will use key opinion leaders to get their perspectives, which enables us to go deeper into the treated patient population. And we'll start to understand the key dynamics that a physician will start to ask questions around. So why would they treat one therapy versus another therapy? We then get our pricing assumptions from the formularies and the dosage assumptions from the labels. That then helps us to calculate cost per patient per year. And essentially what we then do is model out based around the key dynamic factors within that disease area. We then start to think about what events are going to impact the future prescription rates of that particular drug and what the impact of new entrants are. And then that helps us to build out our overall patient-based forecast.
The other question which has come in is, in terms of regional R&D variations, what are we seeing for diabetes given the huge burden in Asia? So Anju, you want to add to this? Answer this question?
Yeah, sure. So, yes, I mean, the Asian region is a high burden region in terms of diabetes, especially China and India. So what we're seeing is that diabetes is in the top 8 categories in Asia and as well as Europe and South America. Essentially in China, it's in the top 5 area in terms of R&D focus, and Japan in the 3rd position, and our studies are showing it as in 4th position in Europe. So yes, there is a focus, but nevertheless, I think oncology reigns, in the overall scheme of things.
Thanks, Anju. So one more question we have is, apart from oncology and anti-infectives, which therapy areas are more potential or good for double-digit growth in coming 2 to 4 years? So Anju, you want to add, and Vince, if you also want to add to it.
Yeah, Vince, you can go first if you'd like to take it.
So yeah, we're seeing significant growth. In terms of that, that's something we can definitely analyze and come back to use for looking for double-digit growth. But there is obviously significant development across the board, particularly around other different disease areas. I don't know offhand specifically which disease areas or indications which are going to give you double-digit growth, but that is something that Informa are definitely able to support with.
Thanks, Vince. So we have one more question. What are some of the meaningful upcoming breast cancer generics opportunities that you might be tracking? So Anju, you want to answer this question?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of overlap in the previous question on the biosims opportunity where we highlighted Perjeta. So that's a breast cancer opportunity. And also we know that Capsula again is a breast cancer opportunity. I'd just like to add that in the case of Perjeta, it's also interesting the kind of initiatives that Roche has taken to kind of cushion itself, from this generic onslaught, because it already has FDA approval now for an FDC of 2 anti-cancer monoclonal antibodies, which, as you probably know, is Phesgo, the trastuzumab and pertuzumab combination, which is available. So these are the big opportunities, Perjeta and I think Capsula are some of the prominent ones, and we can of course get back to you with a number of others if there are specific areas that you're looking at.
Thanks, Anju. The next question we have is, would you be able to share insights on the unmet needs in the global oncology space? So Anju, you want to add here? Answer this question.
Well, there are several areas in the cancer domain, but then these are again niche areas. So in terms of opportunities, some of them may be large patient opportunities, but may not be very big opportunities in terms of numbers. So we can also get back to you on this with using our insights and intelligence team inputs on specifics if you're looking at anything specific.
Thanks, Anju. So the one other question I have here is, how does Pharma Intelligence estimate patient numbers? Vince, you want to show some light on this?
Yes, certainly. So the epidemiology team, so we have a team of epidemiologists. They will routinely be looking at multiple different literature sources that are in the public domain. So things like WHO, Cancer.net, all those other typical sources that will house patient numbers on a global level. The team will then start to look at the validating and verifying those individual patient numbers, making sure that they're a valid source. We'll then use our own team to be starting to look at the differences in different lines of therapy. So using the key opinion leader research that we perform, that starts to help us to influence a percentage around patients that might have a particular mutation or might be at a certain stage. Those different key opinion leader insights, that then helps our analyst teams to predict what is a percentage of patients within a particular indication on a geographical level, what percentage of those are by mutation, by stage, by line, etc. And that's all driven by, firstly, this main starting point being epidemiology studies in the public domain. Then it's driven by our key opinion leader research and using our own team's expert analysis to then help us to give those individual patients by line, by geography.
Thanks, Prince. There's one question on biological products. The question is, any biological products which are losing patents in the 1 to 2 years time frame? So Vince, you might want to give a answer to this.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that we can definitely get back to you with a proper list via email. So for all of those specific biological opportunities, we can definitely answer utilising our platform. So that's something that we can explore for you offline.
Thanks, Vince. I think these are the questions we have for now. And we hope that you enjoyed this session today. If you have any further questions or would like any further information on the areas we have covered today, please feel free to reach out to me. You can see my contact details in the slide. So, Afamia, you want to add finishing points before we wrap up this session?
Thank you, Purna, and to our presenters for that great session. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. As mentioned earlier, a recording of the session will be available on demand following the event. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.